Before the video begins, I would like to mention that if you find this to be too long, you can always skip certain sections by using the timestamps below. This will not only teach you everything about the build, but also variants, whilst including a step-by-step on how to learn it as well. For the full build guide, check the pinned comment under the video or the description. Enjoy. Welcome to Greatsword Spellbreaker class. This is session number 1 and also the only one. You're my only student. Everybody else is playing Hammer at this point. Let's begin. Let's get into it. So, build. Just like the Hammer variant, you want to run full Berserker everything, and your sigils are going to be Force and Accuracy instead of Impact. We'll get into why a little bit later on. So Force Accuracy on weapons, full Berserker everything. Infusions don't actually matter. And then we can get to the build, which is Strength 221, Tactics 111, and Spellbreaker 133. Let's get straight to the traits. Let's jump into the traits. Right, Strength, Reckless Dodge. You can dodge onto enemies to do damage. It also gives you a stack of might. Ideally, if you find yourself dodging because you gotta dodge danger, you can actually use it as a DPS increase by dodging sideways. So the size of the golem hitbox is kind of small. Let's say that if you were to dodge like this, you're not actually going to hit the golem. But if you were to dodge sideways, so let's say, oh, I'm about to get hit by something. You can move a little bit to the side, dodge over here, and it will actually connect with the target. Or let's say instead of dodging like this, right, where you don't actually connect with the golem, you can maybe move back a little bit and then dodge like this, and it will connect to the golem. It's obviously, like, you're still losing damage because you're dodging, obviously. But it does actually hit pretty hard. So in a way, you kind of make the damage loss back by hitting the target, or maybe multiple enemies, because it does have a target cap of 5, right? Then we have Peak Performance, very good trait. 5% extra damage flat, just by having the trait equipped. It reduces the cooldown of your physical skills, so stuff like Bolts Charge, Bolus, Kick, and Stomp, and also Mending, which is your healing skill. And if you use one of these physical skills, it increases your damage by 10 extra percent for 6 seconds. So that's a pretty fat damage boost. Huge. Then Building Momentum. Burst skills restore endurance whenever you hit something. That's pretty good. 15 endurance back. So it makes it so that you can have kind of infinite endurance. You can do some pretty weird stuff with Spellbreaker where you just constantly hitting burst skills and dodging, burst skills and dodging, burst skill dodging, which is pretty nice. Great Fortitude. This gives you Vitality and Ferocity based on your power. Obviously, the Vitality by itself is kind of like, whatever. It gives you extra health, but it's actually pretty good. You can take the Greatsword trait. The Greatsword trait is slightly worse. It's a trait that you would take if you need a little bit of extra might, because maybe you're doing some open world, or, I don't know, you're soloing something, I guess. Yeah, the trait is slightly better. It also gives you extra health, as I said, which is good. Next trait, Pinnacle of Strength. Might apply to you, grants you more power. And also you get 5% crit chance for free because the devs were feeling a little sussy. So yeah, Might makes you do more damage than it does to other people. Unless they also have traits like this one. Berserker's Power, granting critical strike damage when you use a burst skill. This damage is increased based on your adrenaline. So now you're just playing Spellbreaker, so the based on adrenaline meme doesn't actually like matter. But the relevant thing here is that your F2 on Spellbreaker is also a burst skill. So you can get the buff with your F1 hitting enemies. You can also get the buff by hitting enemies with your F2. It would give you, well, I mean, you're just gonna get more value off of it because you're hitting more enemies. You're dazing more enemies, which is also gonna be relevant for this build because CCing enemies gives you big damage, as we'll see later on with this trait. Next trait line. Tactics. Periodically gain Soldier's Focus. Hitting it with a burst skill expends Soldier's Focus to grind might to nearby allies. Now you can see the trait also says that it gives you quickness. That's because of the last trait that we have. We got into that later on. But basically, if you hit an enemy with a burst skill, it gives might and quickness to allies. Pog. Like Specialist, Immobilize a target when you cripple them with a skill. Deal increased strike damage to foes affecting movement pairing conditions. So you do 10% extra damage to enemies that have movement impairing conditions. So stuff like immobilize, I don't know, like cripple, chill, all those things, right? All the things that you would find annoying because you can move, basically. And also bonus meme, because we're running Greatsword, which causes cripple. Instead of crippling the enemies, it will actually mob them. This can be useful basically to keep your own trait up. Because obviously if they're mobbed, you get extra damage. It could be useful to maybe grant extra DPS to your other people in the group. Maybe they have a trait that makes them do more damage based on condis on the enemy. You're making sure that the enemy is maybe like a little bit of extra immobilize uptime, so it can help them with that. But I mean, realistically, the only place this will be useful to you is if you decide to do back work on escort with GS Spellbreaker, because you can immobilize the warg for 1 second. Wow, very exciting stuff. The other traits are whatever, you know. Empowered. Deal increased strike damage for every boon on you. This is pretty self-explanatory. The more boons you have, the more damage you do. Warrior's Cunning. Deal increased strike damage based... damage to foes above the threat threshold. Also deal more damage to foes with barrier. So if enemies have barrier, you do more damage. If enemies are above 80% HP, you do more damage. Right? It's a little strange. This can be like, obviously you might think, oh, the boss is only gonna be above 80% HP once, right? This can actually be really useful in stuff like splits. Let's say, for example, Veil Guardian. You get the boss down to 66%, it phases, and then you gotta fight the odds in the split phase. Those are full HP. So you get to burst them a little bit quicker down to, you know, 80, 70% and whatnot. Same thing on Sabata, you have the ads that spawn at every 25%. Demos, when you get ported. I don't know, CA, you kill little ads. Yeah, I mean, overall this trade is pretty good. It is a little bit weird that it's only above 80%, but it is what it is. Next, Mending Might. Applying Might to an ally heals you. Can't really do anything with this trade. It's only really... I mean, if you were to run something like, for Great Justice, it'd be like Pog, right? But the only Might you're giving is with Marching Orders. So it's just a little bit of extra sustain, right? Why not? Applying Might to an ally heals you. You get 69, which is an amazing number, by the way, of heals every time you give Might to allies with your burst skills, which is very nice. Next, Martial Cadence. Soldier's focus grants quickness to affected allies, which is exactly what I was talking about earlier with Marching Orders. So every time you use a burst skill, you get Might and quickness because of this trade. If you take the trade off, then you can take something else like maybe Phalanx Strength. You can do some weird stuff with, I don't know, you can take the Greatsword trade over here, so you give Might whenever you crit and Phalanx Strength, so now you're giving extra Might to your group. And you're getting healed more because you're giving more Might to your group. There's some weird interactions you can go for, but we're not going to do that. So yeah, a little recap so far. Strength gives you big damage. Physical skills give you even more big damage, so stuff like Bull's Charge and Mending. You can have infinite endurance by using your burst skills and dodging. Extra health, extra damage, extra crit chance. Your Might gives you more damage. Burst skills give you a damage buff because of the straight. Tactics, you are like low-key role-playing as a support player. You give your team Might, quickness. Your cripples are now immobilizes. You do 10% extra damage. You do more damage to foes at barrier or are above 80% HP. You randomly heal yourself when you give Might. And, you know, overall, these two traitlets combined, they give you a decent amount of extra damage. Also, every boon you have, it gives you 1% extra flat DPS, damage increase, which is actually pretty fat. But the more boons you have, the better. Make sure you have every boon in the game. Everything. Even perma-resistance. Next trait line, Spellbreaker. Full counter, absorb the next attack against you and counter attack of foes around you. Foes struck by full counter attack are interrupted. This is a really good skill. It's a burst skill, so it will proc this, it will proc this, and it gives you endurance because of this trait, right? But unfortunately, full counter, it doesn't really work on a lot of stuff in the game, so you're kind of gonna have to use it carefully. Like some example of things where it doesn't work. The Demos knockback, the pizza attack, right? It doesn't work on that. Or Kadim 1 challenge mode, the balls that jump around the platform all over the place. It doesn't work on those. The Matthias Hadouken, it doesn't work on that one. I found that out yesterday. That was fun. But it will generally work on... It will generally work on enemy hits. Or like AoEs that are player tied. So example, the Demos Pizza knockback. Full counter doesn't work on that one, but it will work on the Demos Explosion. Or it will work on the Demos Auto Attacks. Or Matthias, it doesn't work on the Hadouken, but it will work on the spread AoEs. If you want to full counter your own spread AoE, so it doesn't do damage, it will work on that. So, I don't know. It is very inconsistent, so I would recommend just, you know, join a couple of raids and die a couple of times to figure that one out, but you can also just not use it and just have a good time, you know? But yeah, it also does give you 2 seconds of stability, which is pretty good. And yeah, it is a daze, so it's a free 100 break bar damage. I was gonna say 100% break bar damage, Jesus. Pure Strike. Deal increased critical damage. This bonus is doubled against boonless foes. Pretty self-explanatory. You do big damage, especially versus enemies that have no boons. Pog. Dispelling Force. Dazes, stuns, balls, knockdowns, knockbacks, and launches. Remove boons. This trait has no internal cooldown, so as long as you do any of these things, a boon is gone, right? Obviously, we are not playing Hammer right now. We're playing Greatsword, so we don't have like all the Hammer CC. But you can still do it with like Balls Charge. You have Dagger 3. So yeah, you know, that's all the CC you have. That's it at the end. I guess you can also take like maybe Rampage Elite skill, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. Next trait, Sun and Moon style. Gain bonuses for each dagger you equip. Main end, strike damage is increased versus foes with no boons. Off end, heal percentage for outgoing hero damage. So this, again, you just do extra damage to foes that have no boons. 10%, because why not? So, big damage on dagger. Axe, set. Attacker's Insight. Best trait in the game. Gain insights, not the legendary ones. When disabling foes or removing boons, full counter refreshes all burst skills on hit. So, this is probably the main difference between the Greatsword variant and the Hammer variant. When you're on Hammer, you don't have to run Accuracy Sigil because you have so much extra CC on Hammer that you can get so much more precision from the straight because you're basically all the time at 5 stacks. On this build, most of the time you're going to be on 2 stacks, so you are not going to be crit capped unless you take accuracy, especially if you use your Signet during your bubble, right? Which you want to do because something I'll explain later on, but that's good, right? But yeah, that is the main difference. You don't have so much Hammer CC, so you only have 2 stacks of this permanently, basically. So you need to run accuracy to make up the crit chance loss. Unless you were to change some gear pieces, which we'll talk about later as well. But yeah, this trait is really good. Interaction with this trait with your F skills. If your F1, which has a 5 target cap, if your F1 was to hit 5 targets, it would hit 5 targets. Wow, amazing, big damage. But if your F2 was to hit 5 targets, because it's a daze, right? It would actually give you 5 stacks of Attacker's Insight, and you wouldn't have to worry about the trait for a while, basically. Or it's not so much that you wouldn't have to worry about it, but it gives you free extra power and ferocity, which is amazing, right? So if there is ever a situation where you can use F2 and there's a lot of enemies around you, you should definitely do that. Obviously, assuming that you don't fuck over your entire rotation, because then it's not, you know, it's not really that good anymore. But you do gain the stacks of the trait for 15 seconds, which is an amazing, it's an amazing trait. It lasts for ages, right? 15 seconds is like a full boss phase, pretty much. So, pretty good. Last trait, Mega Bane Tether. It reveals enemies, it gives you might, and it does damage. Increased damage to tethered targets. I'm choking, nice. The only weird thing about this is that it doesn't actually work on everything, like structures, for example. So you might not want to play Spellbreaker at all in some fights, because you can't really use the straights on some bosses, like maybe like CA, for example, I guess, is one that comes to mind. But the most annoying thing is that you can't even use it for CC. Like, the way this works is that if I was to use a burst skill on a target, you can see that now it's tethered. If I move away, the tether will go away, because I pulled the golem towards me, right? So it actually does breakbar damage, 150 breakbar damage. Yeah, the tether is invisible, I think only right now, for some reason. I think in this instance it's always invisible. I'm not sure why, but... You can use this for CC. If you have like no CC left whatsoever, and you're like, oh, we're gonna die, right? You can actually run away from the target with like maybe Greatsword 3 or something, and you will pull it towards you. But obviously instead of pulling it, it does CC, so that can be useful in some fights in the game. That's pretty much it. So yeah, recap. Strength gives you big damage. Biggest thing to look for are physical skills. So stuff like this. And your F1, right? Tactics, you give might and quickness to allies for free. The biggest thing here is that you gain 10% damage modifier from the straight, and you do 1% extra damage for every boon you have. Also, you do more damage on foes that are above 80% HP or a barrier. You have a little bit of self-sustain, and that's pretty much it. Spellbreaker, full counter is a skill. I think that says enough by itself. Pure Strike gives you big damage, especially to foes without boons. You remove boons whenever you CC enemies. You do big damage on your Dagger set, Dagger Axe set, because of the straight. Attacker Insight is a very good trait. Every time you CC an enemy, essentially gives you a stack that gives you 50 power, ferocity, and precision. And this trait makes you do extra damage to foes that are tethered, gives you random might, and it's also a CC. Very nice. Yes, you can actually grief with this trait by pulling enemies all over the place. It is a thing you can do. What is the question? Lost version, better on bosses like in 1 because they have perma boons in most cases. Okay. I think overall, I mean, I don't know. I think this trait is just better overall, but if you want to play around with the other one, you just play around with the other one. Nothing wrong with that. It's not like you lose too much. It's not like your build becomes useless. It's still popping off, doing big damage. Alright, no more traits. The traits are over. Let's talk about skills. Well, let's start from Greatsword. Right, auto attack, it auto attacks. You apply Vuln on the first two, you don't apply Vuln on the last one. But obviously the last one does more damage because it's the last one of a chain, which is common for the game. Under Blades, repeatedly strike multiple foes, the last strike does extra damage. Now, this is a good skill. The problem is that you really want to get that last hit to happen, right? Because if the last hit doesn't happen, then you're really sad. There is a little problem with the skill because quickness doesn't work too well with it. Like, if you start the skill without quickness, and then quickness is applied to you as you are casting the skill already, the last hit will play the animation, but it's not going to attack, or it will attack without playing the animation. So you would have to like pay attention to the number at the end to see like how much higher it is than the other ones, I guess. Or you would have to count how many hits actually happened. The skill is a little wonky because it's really old and never updated it. The other inconvenience is that it locks you in place while you use it. So you want to be positioned properly, I guess. Whatever properly means in the context of every fight in the game. Maybe behind him, maybe on the side, maybe like max range. Because otherwise, if, as I said, if you interrupt it, not only are you losing damage, because you're interrupting a skill you're supposed to cast, but the last hit does more damage, so you really want to get that through, right? And yeah, that's kind of all it does. 3 target cap, so, you know, it's not even single target, pretty good. Very, very melee range skill. Whirlwind attack. Again, just like basically every Greatsword skill on Warrior, it is a little bit scuffed. The hitbox of a GS3 is a little wonky. You can see before you actually use it, there is like an actual... It resembles like some kind of spiral, I guess. And it hits 4 times. Now I'm actually going to do this in game. I messed it up. Outgoing damage. So if I do Whirlwind attack from the inside of the hitbox, I think it only hit 3 times, was it? So if I do it from like exactly right here, it's on cooldown. Now it only hit twice. Actually 3 times. One of them I didn't crit. It's right here. Right. So now if I do it from like all the way back here instead, it hits 4 times. So you wanna make sure that every time you use GS3, obviously this is a smaller hitbox of the golem. It wouldn't matter as much if the golem hitbox was massive, but this is something that you would have to learn eventually on Greatsword 3, is that the smaller the hitbox is, the better you need to position yourself when using it, because otherwise it will only hit once. And if it only hit once, it's not even worth using, you just auto-attack instead, right? But if you get into the habit of moving back a little bit before you use it, it will hit more consistently. So, you know, you're about to swap the Greatsword, and then you gotta do Greatsword 2, Greatsword 3. Because Greatsword 2 locks you in place, right now I can't move, right? And instantly after, I need to do GS3. You want to move back before you do GS2. Right, already. So, oh, I'm about to swap the Greatsword. I move back a little bit so I can do this and this combo and I get all the hits. Now, this gets easier if it's a big hitbox. It gets harder if it's a smaller hitbox. It gets really easy if you're standing next to a wall. Because if you're standing next to a wall, you're just basically standing still, right? So you can do this and you get all the hits. But even here, before you go next to the wall, you want to move back a little bit from the wall. Don't ask me why. Just move back from the wall a little bit. Don't be exactly next to it, because otherwise some of the hits will get lost in time space and you will never get them back. But yeah, overall Whirlwind attack is yes. Alright, next skill. Blade Trail. Throw your Greatsword at a foe so that it returns you, crippling foes along the way. This skill is a projectile. Well, it's a physical projectile finisher, so it can actually go through fields and have extra effects like maybe burning or, I don't know, poison or whatever else. So because of that, it can actually be a pretty good damage increase on top of just being a damage increase already by itself. But there is another issue with the skill as well, just like, as I said, with the rest of the Greatsword skills on Warrior, which is if it goes into a wall. But, okay, that kind of went into a wall. It went into the boxes back there. Let's use this wall as an example. Should be better. If it goes into the wall, it never comes back, right? Or if it goes into this... wait. If it goes into, like, this tree branch, it doesn't come back. Now, you would say, like... You would say, like, oh, you know, obviously it works that way. I mean, yeah, it kind of makes sense. But there is other skills in the game that actually don't work like this. They hit a wall and then just return to you faster rather than disappearing into nothingness, right? And so this means that you do have to be careful. If there is a wall where you're throwing it, you want to maybe, like, let's say there is like a wall. Okay, stand over here, Michael. Right. Let's say there is a wall exactly where you're standing right now. If I throw GS4, it's gone. It disappeared, right? So you might want to maybe untarget the boss and aim it yourself manually. So it actually goes and comes back without hitting the target or the hitbox or the wall or whatever. But there is something else as well, which is a little weird, which is edges, or ledges rather. If you throw this off a ledge, it's not coming back. It obviously, it fell off the platform and you're never getting it. In those kind of situations, you either have to manually aim it yourself. For example, again, there's like a ledge behind the boss. Instead of throwing the Greatsword 4 like this, so it falls off and doesn't come back, you want to position yourself sideways so that it does come back. This is probably going to happen to a lot of people on stuff like Zera when you tanker on the edge in some of the phases. Or, I don't know, maybe, well, that's the only boss I can think of right now. But yeah, it is obviously like, it's not going to end your warrior career if this doesn't come back. But obviously, you know, if there is another warrior that's doing it properly and you aren't, it will do more damage than you. And you don't want to be doing less damage than him, right? You gotta pop off. You gotta think outside the box. Otherwise, if you're like, oh, I can't throw GS4 because there is 5 walls surrounding me. Every one of these walls somehow is also a ledge. And there is projectile blocks everywhere around me. Basically, you're doing World v World, right? Instead of throwing GS4 and like taking the gamble, just auto attack. Right? The damage loss of auto attacking and GS4 is actually not that big. To the point where, if I remember correctly, if you only throw it and it doesn't come back, auto attacking was already better than that. It's not worth the cast time if it doesn't return. So yeah, you might be stuck in auto attacks for a little bit longer, but you actually just, you're just better off that way, right? And yeah, so GS2, to recap the scuffness, right? Like GS2 locks you in place and you need to have proper quickness or it might delete itself. GS3, you gotta position maybe a little bit back so that the connection point of the skill actually works properly. See right there, it actually did hit 4 times. But if I was to do it like this, it only hit 3 times and one of them didn't even crit because I'm not crit capped. But yeah, a little bit of practice with that. GS4, don't throw it off of ledges or into walls. If it doesn't return, it's a DPS loss, so you might maybe just want to auto attack instead. Otherwise, it's a pretty good skill. Big damage, it cripples, which is actually immobilized because of your traits and tactics. And if it goes through a field, it might have an extra effect, like maybe poison or burning, which is obviously not going to be like insane damage increase, but it's a damage increase nonetheless, so why not? GS5 locks you in place, very long cooldown, and if a target is moving while you're using it, you might just die. So be very careful when you use it on enemies that are in movement, because the skill actually has movement prediction. So, example, the golem moves a little bit like in this direction over here when I'm walking right now, and I'm using GS5, but then the golem stops. My skill will basically make me go over here and then maybe turn around towards it, and it will maybe make me fall off a cliff or something, right? This is probably the most notorious PvP skill in the game because of how dysfunctional it is, right? It is honestly just, it is so scuffed. It's crazy. But if a target is standing still, you can use it and it will just do big damage, right? It's also a very, very long distance movement skill. Very nice. And if the target is just like barely outside of your reach, so let's say like this, it will actually extend the skill's length just to get you there either way, right? Like right now, I'm not about to reach it, and then it just like zooms towards it, and it gets me even further than I'm supposed to get. Right, so overall, it's a bit of a broken skill, just like the rest of the Greatsword skills on Warrior, but it actually hits pretty hard, even if the cast time is long. And again, it does lock you in place. Arcing Slice. Burst. Deliver a circular attack to foes around you and gain Fury. Deal more damage to foes with low health. Now, if a foe is under 50% HP, you do big damage. That's nice. Obviously, procs Berserker Power gives you endurance because of traits. It gives you free Fury uptime, number of targets 5, and it's just a very satisfying skill to use. Try it. Try how satisfying it is. Give it a shot. Give it a slice. Ooh. That felt good. I felt good. Yeah. Alright, let's talk about Dagger Skills now. Breaching Strike. Big damage skill. If the target has no boons, it does even more damage, obviously because it's Spellbreaker related, and that's basically what Spellbreaker is all about. And it actually removes boons. It removes 2 boons for free. And it's also a leap. And it's also unblockable. And it's also a movement skill. But yeah, we're gonna be using this, well, twice per loop, I guess. Auto attacks, big damage on the first 2. Big damage on the last one as well, because it's the one that is at the end of the chain. And it gives might, and it gives you even more might if you crit, which you're basically always doing with this build, because you are a power build, right? So you are, on most power builds in the game, you're going to be playing to crit cap. And that just gives you free might. Together with your Greatsword F1, you also have free fury. And because of some other stuff, you have even more might. Well, because of this trait, right? So you have a lot of self stuff on this build, which is gonna make it a little bit nicer in pugs. Not as nice as if you were playing Hammer, obviously, because Hammer gives you like perma stab and it makes you immortal essentially. But it's nice to have a little bit of self-sustain. Yeah, also the Tether, that's true, that also gives might. Yeah, this whole build guide is just to make people play Hammer Spellbreaker. I keep mentioning so many times, people are like, this guy never shuts the fuck up about it, I need to take a look, right? Dagger 2. It applies slow, it does damage, it's a leap, it's a movement skill. Very short cooldown as well. Damage increase, and the fact that it's a leap will be relevant for later on. Dagger 3, it's a CC, breakbar damage. It's an instant cast, or that's what the game wants you to think. In reality, it isn't. But the cast time is actually really fast. So, because of the fact that the game wants you to think it's an insta cast, it actually doesn't show the yellow bar at the bottom of the screen like most other skills in the game do. So if I was to use it, there's no yellow thingy happening, right? But you can actually interrupt it by, I don't know, weapon stowing or dodging if you do it at the right moment. Axe 4. Big damage. Gives you quickness. 3 target cap. Melee range skill, just like the rest of your dagger skills, basically. Huge damage. Very, very fast cast time. Free quickness. Amazing, right? Axe 5. Makes you move faster when you use it. It's a whirl finisher. And it does huge damage. Pog. Look at that. Crazy. Spin and attack nearby foes. You can move while spinning. I like that they can say you can move while spinning just to make fun of Soul Beast. Very nice tooltip for internet. So, little recap on the weapons. Greatsword, your F1, does big damage. And obviously it procs traits. Auto attack gives you vuln and does big damage. GS2 locks you in place and does big damage. It's a little wonky with quickness. GS3, you want to maybe move a little bit back before you use it, because the hitbox detection is a little scuffed. GS4, only use it if the blade actually comes back, so don't throw it into walls or off of ledges. GS5, don't use it if a target is in movement, because you never know in which part of the map you will end up with. Or maybe you just die. And yeah, also GS3 is also an evade, and it's a movement skill. GS5 is a very, very long movement skill, very long distance movement skill. And GS2, 3, and 5, all 3 of them lock you in place. Technically, GS3 does as well, because once you press it, you can't really move anywhere. But yeah. Dagger, F1, big damage, boon removes, leap, movement skill, does extra damage to foes with the boons. Auto attacks make you do big damage, and it gives you might on the 3rd one. Even more might, or an extra stack of might if you crit, which you're basically always doing. Dagger 2 is a movement skill, leap, and it applies slow and does damage. Dagger 3, CC, and it's a fake instacast. Axe 4, big damage, gives you quickness. Axe 5, big damage, makes you move faster when you use it. And it's a whirl finisher, which can be useful for maybe I don't know, you can get those cleansing bolts on your team and, you know, remove the condies. Wow, crazy. Or, you know, maybe extra burning stacks. And now let's talk about utilities. Mending your heal removes condies and heal yourself. The reason why we run this is actually not because of the healing or the condi removal. The two biggest qualities of this are that, I mean, honestly, okay, the biggest quality of this skill is the fact that the cooldown is 12 seconds. This is honestly just ridiculous. Obviously, that's without counting the alacrity. It's just 12 seconds because of the fact that you're running. Because of the fact that you're running peak performance trait, the cooldown on the heal, which is 15, is reduced to 12, right? So it's a condi cleanse, pretty decent healing skill on a 12-second cooldown, which is less with alacrity, right? But let's assume we never have alacrity. We're actually running this because of peak performance. It's a physical skill, right? So if you use this, you gain 10% extra damage for 6 seconds. Now, that sounds really, really good. It's actually not as good as it sounds because you will basically use this at the same time as Bolt's Charge. So it's not like, I don't know, you're not really getting like an insane amount of value from that. But it's a free damage increase, so you might as well just take it. It's a short healing skill, so you might as well just take it. It condi cleanses, you might as well just take it, right? So you want to use this at the beginning of every fight, at the beginning of every phase. If you need to burst something down, if you want the damage buff from the trait, but you don't want to use Bolt's Charge. Right? Because maybe you need Bolt's Charge for movement, you need to run somewhere. Maybe you need Bolt's Charge for CC. Maybe you need Bolt's Charge because, I don't know, you want to look at the icon and you don't want to put it on cooldown because the icon looks nice, right? Fucking no, whatever. But yeah, next is Bolt's Charge. Charge and knock down your foe. 3-second knockdown, 300 breakbar damage. It's actually an evade, it's a leap, and obviously it does damage, and just like your healing skill, because it's a physical skill, it procs a trait, right? So we're going to be using that to proc the trait, and also get a stack of this trait, Attacker's Insight, because obviously being a knockdown, it gives you a stack. The reason why we don't take stuff like Kick or Stomp is because the cooldowns are long, or because they don't do enough damage, or because they're just worse, basically, right? Next skill, Signet. Signet of Fury. Improves precision passively, so you can just kind of let it stay there and it will do its own thing of giving you a crit chance for free. On this build, we can actually use it every single time we use our elite skill for, you can say, 2 reasons, right? First one, which is probably the most important one, which is like the idea of it. When you are placing your elite skill on the ground, Winds of Disenchantment, you're doing that because it's a lightning field. And by leaping in a lightning field, with your Dagger 2, with your F1 on Dagger, with your Bolt's Charge, those become dazing strikes. Now, if you hit an enemy with a dazing strike, you get stacks of AI, right? So because the stacks of AI give you a lot of precision and a lot of crit chance, you can actually lose the Signet passive precision for a little bit, and instead gain just a lot of precision and a lot of ferocity from the active. And then by the time the skill is off cooldown, your AI stacks will be gone. Well, your 5 AI stacks will be gone, because you're gonna have 5. You're gonna be down to 2, but the Signet will be off cooldown, so you actually basically keep the same amount of crit chance, and the only thing you gained is damage, which is what we're doing, right? You gained 360 ferocity for free, and you basically lost nothing. What I'm saying is that we are going to activate the Signet, so we are not going to be keeping it passively, just standing there doing nothing, right? Also, activating it gives you full adrenaline, which is nice, because that means you can use your F1. If you're ever in a situation where you don't have adrenaline, you can use your Signet, but that will basically never happen because you are basically always going to be using the Signet at the beginning of a phase together with your Winds of Disenchantment. Or, as we were saying earlier, your full counter, your F2, if you were to hit multiple enemies with your F2 and daze all of them, that would also give you multiple stacks of AI, right? So if you're ever in a situation you're like, oh, dude, I hit so many enemies with my F2, I have so many stacks, but now I don't have enough adrenaline to use my F1, maybe. Or I have enough adrenaline to use my F1 on Greatsword, but as soon as I swap to Dagger, I'm fucked. I don't have any more adrenaline, right? In that case, you can use your Signet. This will give you full adrenaline. You don't lose the crit chance because you have 5 stacks, right? And you're just having an amazing time, right? Obviously, if it's a fight, it gets maybe a little bit weird, but if it's a fight where you can use your F2 a lot, or it's a fight where you don't generate a lot of adrenaline for whatever reason, maybe the target is like unhittable, you might want to take another healing skill, which is to the limit. Yes, you don't have the extra damage buff from Mending, but the damage buff from Mending is not insane anyway, right? The only thing that... okay, just think about it like this. Mending will only buff the damage of 1 hit of your elite. Your elite skill is going to hit 5 times. It will only buff 1 proc of your elite skill and your Bull's Charge damage. That's it. Because as soon as you use Bull's Charge, then it reapplies Peak Performance. So the one that you gave yourself with Mending is completely useless, right? This is where like the value of Mending comes into play. You know, it's a short healing skill, it's a Condi cleanse. You can use it instead of Bull's Charge if you want to maybe burst some trash mobs down or something, right? But if you want to take to the limit instead of Mending, you can easily do that. It doesn't really like change much. In some fights, it's better to do that, right? And what to the limit does is it gives you more healing than Mending. Obviously, it's a much longer cooldown. The cast time is longer as well. But it gives you and your allies endurance, which is like, wow, I'm so helpful, I'm so useful. And then you have the Daredevil crying in the corner because you fucked his rotation up completely, right? Isn't cast time the same? It is. I'm lying. Wait, I thought this was half a second for some reason, but it isn't. But yeah, this can be useful to give you endurance and your allies as well, or it can grief your allies if you give them endurance because they don't want it, right? Like maybe a Rev, maybe a Thief, right? And it also, you know, the main point is that it gives you full adrenaline so that you don't have to use Signet of Fury, right? But for now, we're going to be running Mending. Signet of Might. It gives you damage. That's basically it. It also makes your attacks unblockable, and you get 10 stacks of Might. You basically never want to activate this for Might. You can maybe use this for unblockable attacks, or maybe some encounters such as, I don't know, Twisted Castle in Wing 3, or any adds that have unblockable attack. Maybe in open world or something, I don't know. But yeah, you can activate it to make your attacks unblockable for 6 seconds. It's pretty good. And then we have your elite skill. Your elite skill wins a disenchantment. It is more of a relevant skill in this build than it is on the hammer one. On the golem anyway. In a real fight, it's like just as relevant for both, I guess. But the skill does damage. It removes boons. And it reduces the boon duration of enemies by 100%. It's basically a boon removal. And it does damage, and it's a lightning field, and it's unblockable. Right? Lots of stuff. The main thing is that it's a lightning field, and it can be useful as a boon strip in some fights. Just keep in mind that we are always going to use this together with our leaps and our Signet of Fury. Unless you really, really need it for a boon strip right now, right? Or you really, really need it for like a projectile destruction, like on Matthias, for example. You know, it can be useful. You know, you don't have a reflect on Matthias. You place the bubble on yourself, not on the boss, so that you and your team don't die. But if you have like a backup reflect, they can still reflect the boss because the bubble is on you, not on the target, right? You can do some, you know, you can do some stuff with it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the general idea and do a little recap. So Mending gives you a very short healing skill, gives you damage buff. You can replace it to the limit if you need more adrenaline. Bull's Charge, damage increase. It gives you a stack of AI because it's a knockdown. It's an evade. Signet, it passively gives you precision, but we actually are going to activate it together with our elite skill to gain extra ferocity for free. Signet of Might, it gives you just power, that's it. It can maybe be used as unblockable attacks if there's somebody blocking you, which basically never happens. And then your elite skill, it removes boons, essentially. Projectile distraction, and it's a lightning field, right? So the idea of the whole build is that you want to obviously proc a lot of your F1s because of this trait, and you want to proc a lot of, you want to try and do as much CC as possible so that you can proc this trait, right? And in the middle of that, you want to proc your big performance buff and do big damage, pretty much, right? With the weapons that you were given, which are Greatsword, Dagger, and Axe. So the opener of the rotation, and it's also going to be what you're going to be doing for the rest of the fight, basically, every time that your elite is ready. You want to start the fight by using Mending at the beginning of a fight or at the beginning of a phase, right? Before you actually start attacking the boss. So the buff is just standing there and you can just ignore it for the rest of the fight or the next phase or whatever, right? You use Mending and then you use your elite skill and then your Signet and then your Bull's Charge in this order, right? Mending, it gives you damage buff. Elite skill, it's just on the ground doing damage and it plays the lightning field, right? And then you want to use your Signet, because yes, it does actually, it loses you 180 precision, but it actually gives you double that for 4 seconds and the ferocity. Now, this is like the cool part, I guess. In those 4 seconds that you have of time before you lose that precision, you actually make that precision back, right? Because in those 4 seconds, what you are going to be doing is you're going to be leaping in your Winds of Disenchantment 3 times. That's the cool part. I got lost. So you have 4 seconds of time before the Signet runs out. Like, look at how much crit chance the Signet gives you when you activate it, right? Right now I'm at 96%. But, well, I'm supposed to have... You're supposed to have 101% because you're usually standing at 2 stacks of this. So now I'm at... Let's get to 0 stacks. Look at how depressing this is, right? Activate my Signet, 113%. Then it's gone. That should be less. Because this one goes away. So I have 104%, right? And then it goes down to 87. Right? So right now, if I don't have any AI stacks, my crit chance is gone, right? You're very sad, right? So we're going to be using the Signet, and then we're going to be getting AI stacks by leaping into the field. And now when the Signet is gone, I still have 99.66% crit chance, right? So I'm just chilling. It's all good. And then by the time my stacks are gone, which is... wait, oh fuck, I should have been paying more attention. I will actually do this again. So now my Signet is gone, I have 99.66. When my stacks are gone, my Signet will actually be ready. And I didn't really like sacrifice any precision at all. And now I'm going to be down to 96%, but that's because I didn't use my Dagger 3 to get a stack. I didn't use my Bull's Charge to get a stack. But yeah, that is the opener, basically. So yeah, that is the cool thing. The crit chance is very epic, right? You lose it, but you only lose it by, what is it, like 0.34%. But that 0.34% that's gonna maybe make you miss like a crit is actually an insane amount of damage boost that you got when you had the Signet on. for the extra ferocity, right? So yeah, this is your opener. You do Mending, Elite, Signet, Bull's Charge, and then you do your F1 on Greatsword, right? And that is the opener. And that is basically what you're doing every time. Yeah. I mean, you can do that. I mean, in some fights, you maybe want to open with GS4 as you're walking to the boss, maybe. In some fights, you want to start with GS5. Obviously, it's all gonna depend, right? In some fights, maybe you don't even use GS4 at all because of the fact that there's walls, because of the fact that there is ledges and whatnot, right? There we go. Now you have 5 stacks and you're having an amazing time. Pog. But yeah, that is the idea, right? So you start with Mending, maybe to the limit if you don't want to, or you know, you don't have enough adrenaline in the encounter you're doing specifically. Then you do your Bubble, then you do your Signet, then you do Bull's Charge, F1, and then you do X4, 3, F1, 2, and then you do 5, right? That is the Dagger beginning. Dagger beginning is 4, 3, F1, 2, and then you do 5. Feels good, man. And that is kind of that's like that's the opener done, basically, right? That is the opener done. So now we can continue on Dagger, right? When you can actually start this right now. So do 4, 3, F1, 2, and 5 as normal. And then you auto attack until your F1 is ready. And then you do 2, 4, 3, and weapon swap. While you do F1, 2, 4, 3, and weapon swap. So 4, 3, F1, 2, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, F1, 2, 4, 3. Yes. You want to do F1 first and then Dagger 2, right? Basically, you wanna make it so that the lineup is perfect to use F1, Dagger 2, 4, and 3 all back to back. You do, I think it's 3 auto attack chains on Dagger, and then everything fits perfectly. 1, 2, 4, 3, and then you swap. And that is, I guess that is like the, well, that's not the opener anymore, technically. Now you're leaning into the loop. But yeah, you can do this up until now. So let's swap to GS. So Mending, Elite, Signet, Bull's Charge. There we go. Now you do 3 auto chains. F1, 2, 4, 3, and then you swap to Greatsword. Very nice. So let's roleplay as if we're swapping back to Greatsword. That's fine. So now I gotta wait for the cooldowns. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, F1, 2, 4, 3. Now you swap to Greatsword and you do GS2, 3, and 5. This is, I mean, you probably did play the game back then, but this is what you used to do back on old Greatsword Warrior. The difference is that instead of using GS5, you dodged towards the target. Yeah, that was good. And then use GS5 in melee range. Okay, now you do 3 auto attack chains. Two, 3, 5. Dude, I feel you. Holy shit. I had the exact same issue when I was learning this. I would do 2, 3, 5 and throw Greatsword 4 because that's dude, that's muscle memory from like 5 years ago. Holy shit. Oh man. Yeah, I gotta F1 at the start and then F1 at the end. 3, 5. Okay, so now you do 2 auto attack chains. right? 2 auto attack chains, and then the rotation restarts, basically, right? So this is the rotation so far. Mending, Elite, Signet, Bull's Charge, F1, 4, 3, F1, 2, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, F1, 2, 4, 3, F1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's the rotation so far, right? So from this point on, you restart the whole thing exactly like you did it so far. Only difference is because you're not using your Winds of Disenchantment, which is the reason why you can use your Signet active, right? Because you don't have that, you just don't activate the Signet. You just keep it there doing nothing, right? But everything else is the exact same. So you start by using Bull's Charge, doing F1, and then you use GS4, and then you swap to Dagger, and then the build is exactly the same. Nothing changes, right? So you do 3 auto chains. 1, 2, 4, 3, F1, 2, 3, 5. Now you do 2 auto chains, and then you do Bull's Charge. F1, 4, and then it just loops. Okay, now you got the rotation down. So now the only difference is when your bubble does come off cooldown, it's actually quite simple to understand. So those 2 auto attack chains you're doing on Greatsword, right? It is filler. It is complete downtime. You don't want to do them realistically, right? You would rather maybe do another Greatsword 2 or more Axe 5s or whatever, right? Instead of doing 2 auto attack chains on Greatsword, you do 1 auto attack chain on Greatsword, and the second one is replaced by the cast time of the bubble. Right? And that's the only difference. So you do, when you are at that point where the bubble is ready, so you do F1, 2, 3, 5, you do 1 auto attack chain, 1, 2, 3, place the bubble, Signet, Bull's Charge. Yes, and then you just repeat the opener. Well, yeah, you basically repeat the opener the whole time. It's just that you do 1 auto attack chain on Greatsword beforehand. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, without mending. Well, in a real fight, you might maybe want to use mending, like maybe on a Gorseval when you come back from the split, or like Veil Guardian or whatever, because you do actually have time to do that, right? Yes, exactly. When you bubble, you Signet. It's not because the bubble itself gives you crit chance, so you can afford to lose it, but the bubble being a lightning field makes it so your dazing strikes give you crit chance because of this trait, right? And you just get free ferocity for nothing. Wow, look at this DPS. You actually beat the benchmark. Oh, also, obviously, for people that are practicing this on the Golem, keep in mind this does run tactics. So if you select all boons from the console, it is going to be like unrealistic because you have too many boons. But that's actually okay. You can just use all the boons and not use any food. And it will, you know, more or less give you good numbers. But yeah, that is Greatsword Spellbreaker. I feel like it's a little bit easier to explain than Hammer, because Hammer has a lot of skills that, I don't know, maybe look the same, maybe are weirder. You do more burst damage. Your damage happens faster than it does on Hammer, and your DPS is actually increased on, like, you get more value from this trait in fights that has a lot of enemies that spawn at full HP, basically, right? I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, you have extra boon generation for your group if maybe the might is bad or the quickness is bad, but it's mostly about just doing more burst damage, I would say. If it's not a fight that is super short, I would just always play hammer. But it's good to have both options. Like, if you look at the difference between the hammer build and the greatsword build, rotation-wise, they are super similar. So I think there is definitely value in just learning both, because of the fact that obviously the rotations are super similar, right? You're like, oh, I need more group quickness, and this boss doesn't require a lot of CC. Okay, you play greatsword, or maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm bored of hammer. I want to play greatsword. You play greatsword. Oh, I'm bored of greatsword. I want to play hammer. You play hammer, right? The gear is more or less the same. The rotation is more or less the same. The spec is the same. The idea of the build is the same, so it's not going to be too confusing switching from one or the other. Yeah, I'm actually going to get to that right now, Kith. Now, one last final thing. There is going to be some fights in which you can't use Greatsword 2, or you can't use Greatsword 3, or you can't use Greatsword 5. This is obviously because the skills lock you in place, they lock you in a specific direction, and they take ages to cast. Let's say that you can't use any of these skills. The only thing you can do is auto-attack on Greatsword. There is no other choice. Like, you're not going to be dodging on the target when you can just auto-attack, right? But let's say you're in a fight that does allow you to use stuff like GS3 and 5, right? The best example I can think of is actually Harvest Temple Challenge mode. Maybe Demos as well with the oils. There's going to be some situations where you cannot use GS3 because otherwise you either fall off the platform, you go into an oil, you go into a giant damaging AoE that actually straight up one-shots you. But you can maybe do it later on, right? So everybody keep in mind, there is a point when you're on Greatsword that you're doing 2 auto attacks for downtime, right? Those 2 auto attacks of downtime give you the choice of kind of using those auto attacks whenever you want. You don't have to use them right before you swap the Greatsword, right? So I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example now, right? Let's say I just swapped to Greatsword, right? I do F1, 2, 3, 5, and now I'm doing these 2 auto attacks before I go back to Dagger again, right? If you can't do GS3 and 5, you can just do this. You do GS2, 2 auto attack chains, and then you do 3 and 5. And your rotation isn't gonna change at all. You're just using the skills. You're like flipping the skills around, right? But they have the same exact cast time. They have the exact, they take, you know, the same time to use. It doesn't delay anything, right? Well, yeah, obviously it is a damage loss, right? There is a reason why you're using them when you are, and like look at this. Well, I guess I can just do a full opener right now. Like, pay attention to my stacks, okay, of Attacker's Insight. So right now I have 5 stacks, okay? Look at my stacks after I use GS5. After I use GS5. Now I'm down to 2, right? My GS3 had 5 4 stacks. My GS5 had like maybe 4 or 3, right? Maybe it depends on like a couple of things. But obviously, if you use these skills when you have 2 stacks, right? It's obviously going to be worse than if you use the skills when you have 5 or 4 or 3 stacks. It's better to have those 2 stacks when you're auto-attacking instead. Also because, so I do this right now, I have 101% crit chance. But if you're doing that when your signet is still not off cooldown, maybe your GS5 doesn't crit. I don't know. Maybe your GS3 doesn't crit, right? And obviously, if your GS3 doesn't crit, you're sad. If your GS5 doesn't crit, you're sad. Because it does so much damage. It's such a long cast time. You want it to crit, right? But obviously, as I said, if you're in a situation where you can't use them exactly in the moment, so if you can't do F1, 2, 3, 5, you can always do something like, if my action key actually resets my cooldowns, you can do F1, 2, 5, 3, right? Or you can do F1, 2. Then you do 2 auto attack chains. 3, 5, right? Or maybe you can do 2 auto attack chains, 5, 3. Yes, it's a damage loss, but it's still better than just not using them. Because if you don't use these skills at all, I can show you how the rotation is gonna look like otherwise, right? This is what the rotation is gonna look like. You swap the Greatsword, and then oh shit, I have to do damage, oh no, right? Like, you don't want to be out-attacking for like 7 seconds. That is... that's honestly just sad. Like, you don't want to... It's not that you don't want to do it because of the damage loss. You don't want to do it because it actually makes you sad. That's the main thing here. But yeah, that's something that you can do. Like, I've had this issue as well on Harvest Temple CM during the Kakatoric phase, when you use the giant laser beams that essentially one-shot you. They don't actually, but they basically do, right? You just kind of sit in there awkwardly, not being able to use GS3 or 5 properly, because you either need to aim them from like exactly the edge of the platform into the goop, and you can do it living and doing the full damage, but then you need to position yourself weird. Or you just leap off the platform and die, right? So you can just delay those skills and then you're having a good time. The same thing goes for GS2, right? If you can't do GS2 for the exact same reason, you can just do 2 auto attack chains and then you do GS2, 3, 5, and then you just restart your rotation, right? The important thing is that you don't skip your F1. Your Greatsword F1, you never want to skip that. Obviously, that one doesn't lock you in place, right? You can do this as you're moving, you can do this as you're turned around, right? You can do this, you can do whatever you want. You can do this while you're jumping, you can do this whenever you want. You don't want to delay this, because this you actually need before you swap the dagger again. If you delay this by a couple of seconds, you won't be able to use it again before, well, no, a couple of seconds is fine. But if you delay it by too long, then you won't have it ready when you need to swap the dagger, right? Which means you only use one Greatsword F1 in the Greatsword loop, which means you lose a lot of damage. You lose a little bit of Free Fury uptime, you lose, I don't know, adrenaline, but you also lose Berserker's Power, which is the relevant thing here. You lose a little bit of group might, you lose a little bit of group quickness, right? Maybe you don't proc the tether. You know, it could be a lot of stuff that you're actually missing out on. That is the important thing. As long as you get your Greatsword F1 in the phase, you can move the 2 auto attacks at the beginning. They can be at the end. They can be, let's say you want to do GS2, 2 auto attacks, and then you do 3 and 5. Or you want to do GS2, 1 auto attack chain, GS3, another auto attack chain, and then you do GS5, right? As long as you use the exact same skills, you just like flip them all over the place, it will still be okay. It's not gonna be as much damage, again, right? Because the reason why you want to use them when you do is because you have the most stacks of this. You have 4 stacks of AI, which means you're buffing your GS3 and your GS5 the most, right? But if you flip them around, it's all good. That is basically it. I think the Greatsword 3-5 thing maybe helps people a lot. Other than that, main things, if you want to use to the limit instead of mending, you can do that. If you need to swap your accuracy sigil for something like Night or Impact, you can change your gear to have Assassin Shoulders, Leggings, and 1 ring. Right, so right now I'm gonna go to Greatsword. I'm gonna change this to Impact. So let's see, shoulders. Let's go with Assassin Shoulder. My nose is very itchy. I don't understand why. So this as well. And now I'm at 93%. That's without any stacks. Then you also want to buy this food. It's actually really cheap. It's truffle steak. This is a classic old food of Guild Wars 2 PvE. Buy one of these, pop it. Now you're at 96.47% crit chance, which obviously, with the stacks you get from the traits, you will actually have more than that, right? And then you're having a good time. You can also obviously go for the Ascended version, which is called... Oh yeah, it's the cock food. Yeah, of course. It is the cock food. It's this one. Plate of cock. Which is basically the truffle steak, but it's ascended and it gives you lifesteal, right? And then your build is done. I mean, there's a couple of ways you can get to that amount of crit chance again, but... Again, it doesn't matter too much because you're overcapping on this build either way. You're like 101% crit chance basically the entire time. But yeah, that is it. Thank you for watching, thank you for memeing, and goodbye.